Greetings. Call the meeting to order and begin with the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Welcome. This is quite exciting, actually. I want to say good morning to our speaker, Joe Yukna, who will take charge right after a brief business meeting. I want to say particular welcome to our 4 new members today. Growing faster than almost any other organization in town. Randy Day is the new pastor at the Congregational Church. You want to just stand up and
Yeah, sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Welcome.
Frank Patch. Frank Patch. There he is. Thank you. Sam Ford.
Sean.
Right?
Yes, Sean.
John.
Sean.
Sean.
So that's my nickname. Sorry. Real
Russ
name's
Maloney
John.
wrote the thing, and
I change it every day.
nobody
Blame
can read his writing into it.
She
Sean,
didn't get out of the
welcome.
post office anyway, so you're all right.
And
Thank you.
yes,
Guess I'm not a big funding.
and Pete Jackson, blue sweater.
All right.
Welcome. I think you've each filled out an application. Dues are $25 for the year, and those will be happily received by our treasurer, Harvey Beth. On the good news front, we have found today a volunteer, first one in 4 years, who will succeed Harvey as the treasurer. That's Jim Facemeyer, an old friend, but a member for a number of years. The minutes of October 3 this year, a great meeting with Marty Sandler. They're distributed with the newsletter. Are there any corrections, amendments, proposals? If not, may we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Harry, thank you. The treasurer's report, Harvey.
Okay. Robust treasury has grown over the month by, actually it has shrunk by about $1,106.33. The reason that it shrunk is that we raised in revenues $25 in the month of October, but we spent, it's $1,131.33. The reason for the expenditure is that we made our annual $100 contributions to 6 charities. So that was $600 plus we gave a $500, we got $500 in gift certificates, Stop and Shop, that we hand out to the people that have been supportive. So as a result of all of that, we started the month off with $2,396.72 to be precise. And we ended up the month with $2,290.39. In addition to that, we presently have about 125 and a little more to be deposited as a result of collections for the annual luncheon. So that our robust treasury is going to be somewhere around $1,800 to $1,900.
Any questions or comments? We have a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Finally went to the VA.
I just have a few,
Weeks now. I still haven't got
I just have a couple of business matters. Our next meeting is December 5, first Tuesday in December, and that is the annual High Fives group from the high school. There'll be 8 to 10 youngsters who will come and be the program, tell us where they came from, what they do, where they hope to go to college, and so forth and so on. It's always a highlight. The superintendent of schools will be here, the new principal, Kathleen McSweeney, will be here, and our old friend Lindsay Kett, who's the counselor for the High Fives program. And then we all go on, at least those who sign up and pay, we all go on to luncheon at the Bucatino's restaurant at the end of Route 151. And the kids will be there too, and spread among the tables. So it's a chance to have some conversation directly with some of these students. And every year they knock your socks off, so I hope for a large turnout. Harvey has just covered the grants we made. First of all, we had only 15 members, including some wives, signed up. That's not enough, $35 per person, to cover the 13 freebies that our guests, and the 10 students, 3 staff in the high school. A number of members have been generous in adding a few dollars to the cost of their own lunch reservations. Obviously, wives and guests are invited. It may mean that we would have that before we had today's excitement of new people, it looked like we might have to take almost $200 from our treasury to cover that additional cost. That may disappear, but I would like to have the meeting vote on whether or not that is approved, that to the extent we need it, up to $200, that we may take it from our treasury for that lunch expense.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor, please say
Aye.
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 Any opposition? Carried, thank you. The program for January, which is my last business matter this morning. The January meeting, the first Tuesday is the 2nd of January. Do we want to meet on the 2nd, or as we do in July to avoid the 4th of July? Do we want to meet instead on the 2nd Tuesday, which would be the 9th? If someone wants to make a motion, then we can work from there. We have are we all gonna be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on the 2nd of January? If so, why don't we go ahead with our regular schedule? I'd like to motion that we, is there a second for a meeting on January 2?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you very much. I do want to, the program is going to be what is the future of our club. Bill Winters has been active all year, finding speakers, running trip programs, and so on. Harvey has been the treasurer. Russ Maloney ran the fundraiser and the picnic, and is unable to do that because of his job and other things this coming time, and the fact that after whatever it is, Russ, 30 years of doing that, it's time for new blood. We haven't been able to find new blood. We haven't been able to find a volunteer to be secretary or to be moderator. So we have to talk about that and think upon it. We hope for a significant attendance, and the newsletter will ask for that when it goes out now in December, to have attendance at that meeting on the 2nd. We need some good ideas and we need some volunteers. a decision, of course, if it's adverse, because we cannot find the volunteers to step forward, then that affects other people. It affects what we do for the Boys and Girls Club, which is support not only their scholarship program for the Youth of the Year, which we underwrite for them, but there's always a surplus. That's collecting solicitations of donations at the 2 grocery stores in May and June. It's a huge program for a person overseeing it, signing up members for all of the 2 to 3 hour sessions that we have. These things we gotta do. Opportunities with the high school, other than just the high fives. We have traditionally a visit and lunch at the high school with a tour of classes or whatever in February, which is convenient for us because it's a very short trip from here to the high school. And they've always been wonderful to us. There are other ways to interact with the high school which we could develop. They printed our brochure. We have to talk about it, how we distribute our brochure. Hopefully we'll come to the conclusion that we should distribute our brochure because we'll keep going. We had 57 members and 4 former members who have moved away, but stay close, 3 of whom paid annual dues. Bruce Willard, Chuck Gassier, and one other. Yeah, senior moment. At any rate, our average attendance this year has been 15.4. Winters wants to know where the .4 guy is. At any rate, he would not be here except for the fact that Marty Sandler attracted 20, the picnic attracted 19, and Rodney Collins in April, our town manager, also attracted 19. Out of 58 members, or 57 members, now we've got over 60. That's a poor attendance performance, and we're going to talk in January about how to improve that. So that's my story today, and I want to turn the meeting over to Bill Winters, who will talk a little about program and speakers, and introduce Joe Yukna, our speaker today. Okay,
Thank you, Burke.
save some time for Joe.
Okay, I will do that. I will make this quick. So 1 week from today, next Tuesday, we have an exciting tour up at the Upper Cape Regional Technical School. We've done that in the past. It's always been a lot of fun. So we'll have a tour of the school, and then that will be followed by lunch there. And the kids always do a great job putting on lunch. It's a la carte. There is a menu attached here, so you can take a look and see what you want to order ahead of time if you want. I'll pass this clipboard around and you can sign up for it. Wives, significant others, anybody else that you want to bring along is invited. The tour starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. I live halfway there, so I'm just going to meet you up there. So if you guys wanted to meet here at the senior center at 9 o'clock, carpool, we need to be up there a little before 10 o'clock so we can start off promptly. So I'll pass this around. Feel free to sign up other people. And that should be a lot of fun. Everybody probably got my email about speakers and tours for next year. So we're looking for ideas. Send them to my Oak Tree email address. Whatever you might think would be of interest to everybody, let me know. We'll start to put a schedule together for next year. And that's really about it. We,
Before you, Joe, I forgot one thing. This is the sign-up sheet for the holiday luncheon on December 5. We're gonna pass it around again. Just add your name at the bottom, you better put another page on it. If you haven't signed up. If you have signed up and there isn't a check mark opposite the amount of your payment, then you owe that payment, and Harvey is here to collect it. Most of these 15 have paid, and that's great. I will redo the roster within the next few days based on our new membership. I'll also warn them that if we're going full blast in February, which I expect we will be, these 4 new members will be called on to say a few words about who they are, where they came from, and why they joined the club. Sorry, I left that out.
okay, no problem. So we are absolutely thrilled here this morning to have with us Joe Yukna from the Cape Cod Military Museum. Joe's interest in the military history of the Cape started when he worked as a Department of Defense police officer at Camp Edwards Otis Air National Guard base in the late 1980s. Driving around the base...
Last century.
Long time ago. Driving around the base and seeing all the abandoned buildings made him wonder what went on there. He put out a call to create a military museum on Cape Cod, and his friend Jerry Ellis answered that call. Together they secured 2 barracks and 6 surrounding acres on Camp Edwards, which was then an open base. That was a different time back then. The events of September 11th, 2001 ended that phase of the military museum. After a hiatus, they have been working on getting a venue to tell the Cape's amazing military story. They've been collecting artifacts and information on military activities here in the Cape, as well as the overseas achievements of units that trained here. They have provided various historical societies with military displays and offer a series of photo lectures to educate the public and promote the museum. After leaving the DoD police force, Joe started his own dog training business and is better known as Joe the Dog Man. He is the son of a World War II Korean War Navy veteran and the father of an Army War on Terror veteran. You can learn more about the Cape Cod Military Museum by referring to its website, where you can also support their activities. And I sent out a couple days ago a forward of Joe's latest newsletter, so that has a lot of information on it. It also had a little blurb on the top that Joe is going to give today, which is entitled The 26th Yankee Division During World War II. Please help me welcome Joe Yukna.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to remember to take a picture for our newsletter, and then I'm going to silence my phone, which is an idea, unless you're a doctor and you got an emergency call coming in. All right. Like I said, you don't have a venue, but we have quite a few things. We have a Vietnam era landing craft, if anybody wants a landing craft to set up a display at. Duck boat, uniforms, artifacts, and most importantly, stories. Veterans Day, Saturday, November 11th, I will be doing Washburn at War at the Museum on the Green at 2 o'clock. Okay. This is a fun lecture because it deals with the interaction between the local community and the military. We cover big stories like General Patton visited Washburn Island, gave a speech he wasn't supposed to, got in trouble for it, was covered up. Joe Louis, the world heavyweight boxing champ, did a boxing exhibition on Washburn Island. There are also little stories like the soldiers were so lonely they kept capturing chipmunks to make as pets, and the officer had to order them to release the chipmunks. They'd also steal dogs from people. So it was an interesting time. Little kids would scour the beach, the shores of Washburn Island and Katuitt, Washburn, Quoit Bay, and look for little foil packets of instant coffee. Coffee was rationed everywhere except for the military. So their K rations had these little foil pouches of instant coffee. Well, they could get real coffee, so they'd throw the foil packets away and then wash up intact. And the kids could barter the foil packets of coffee with their mothers who were desperate for coffee. So we cover big stories, little stories. It's a fun lecture. If you feel like traveling, you can get the precursor to this lecture, the Yankee Division in the Great War, which is going to be at 2 o'clock on November 12th at Fort Tabor down in New Bedford. And I bring our mascot. We have a mascot. We don't have a building, we have a mascot. Sergeant Stubby, and he does tricks at the end of the lecture. So that's a fun lecture too. Well, not the gassing of people and stuff like that fun, but Stubby's fun. Lastly, before I get started, we had a Korean War era veteran pass away. As a kid, he had found a couple of arrowheads, and of course, he grew up watching all the westerns and movie serials and television. Became obsessed with the Native American culture. Had quite a collection of Native American art. When he passed away, his family donated the collection to us for sale to raise funds. So this Friday, from 1 to 5 at the Quoit Congregational Church right down the street on 28, we're having a sale. There's pottery, weavings, decorative plates, prints, photographs, all priced to move. So if you know anybody, who has Native American decor or would be interested in that stuff, that's going up. All right. Without further ado, we'll get started on the Yankee Division. The Yankee Division was formed on August 13th, 1917, out of the National Guard units from New England under General Clarence R. Edwards, i.e. Camp Edwards, namesake. The YD served admirably in World War I, and with the winds of war blowing again, the 26th was activated to federal service for a 6-month activation on January 16, 1941. This was not a surprise to the outfit. They had gotten rid of underage and overage and unfit personnel. The division was to be of men from 18 to 30 years old. They had sent non-com officers to specialty schools to prepare to become better trainers. There was a parade for the 181st Infantry in Worcester. The parade was led by Spanish-American War veterans. That's how long ago. It's a long time ago now. The troops wore World War I uniforms, but had the new M1 Garand rifles because the Springfield Armory was making them. Personnel were transported by train to Camp Edwards. Army life had begun for the Army recruits. Once in barracks, they were able to take 90-second showers. You got wet, lathered up for 30 seconds, and 30 seconds to rinse off. That way, the hot water wouldn't run out, and everybody got to take a shower. And you had to take a shower, because if you notice that locomotive photograph, it was a coal-powered locomotive, and you had coal dust on you whenever you went on a train ride. There's the barracks. There's the showers. And, of course, there's other indignities that Army life gives you. The enlistees received so many shots that they had to help each other get dressed because you couldn't raise your arms up. They dressed in mainly wool uniforms of World War I vintage, including puttees. Puttees were woolen or cotton wraps worn around the lower leg. These would invariably unwrap on marches and be stepped on by the following soldiers. They were taught to march, close order drill, military courtesies, weapons fire, including the best anti-tank gun the U.S. had at the time, which is a 37 millimeter M3. And the sergeant's out of step, which is typical. Here they are at Logan Field. This is the main parade ground on Camp Edwards. You can see the 102nd building in the background. Army life was regulated and time was kept by bugle calls. Remember, everybody didn't have a watch. There weren't digital watches. There weren't phones. There were 16 bugle calls a day. Fitness was achieved through calisthenics, obstacle courses, and hikes. The men were hiked so far and so often, a pair of shoes would last on average 3 weeks. And you're marching with 60 pounds on your back. Sometimes 12 miles out, 12 miles back. Well, it's almost a marathon with 60 pounds on your back. The worst job was kitchen police, KP. It's a 16-hour shift that started at 4 a.m. or 0400 hours. The worst part was peeling potatoes or scrubbing pots. Potatoes were served at every meal. One evening in the spring of 1941, the Yankee Division troops were marched 11 miles from Camp Edwards to Lawrence Pond in Sandwich. There they silently carried 8-man rubber rafts into the water. They loaded their equipment and paddled their way across the pond. They seized the high ground, advanced behind smoke screens and 30 caliber machine gun tracer fire. Anti-aircraft units assigned to the Yankee Division practice on Sandwich beaches. If you look, you can see the stones of the canal and that little red light that's on the end, the Sandwich end of the canal, on the right, just above the guy with the boonie hat on. That's where Hemispheres, Horizons, or what is it now, a brewery, Beach Tree Brewery or something like that, is in Sandwich. That's the parking lot. A little noisier back in the day. In mid-August, the YD was trucked up to Fort Devens for a large training exercise. Many GIs threw folded-up notes stating they were lonesome soldiers looking for a pen pal. They're wrapped around rocks, and more than a few romances began this way. The Fort Devens exercise was practiced for the Carolina maneuvers in October 2nd to December 3rd. This was the largest war game to date, 500,000 troops, 4 million blank cartridges. There were tanks, artillery, airplanes, dropping bags of flour for realism. Here they are with their prize weapon, the 37 millimeter anti-tank gun, which would bounce harmlessly off a German Jack. But that's what we had. And they took lots of pictures of that gun. They really liked that gun. The weekends were free. And so Southern hospitality was not a myth, and the New Englanders were wined and dined by the local populances. This was long before KFC, and many soldiers tasted fried chicken for the first time. When asked by their Southern hosts what the YD stood for on their patch, the clever troopers told them it meant "Yay, Dixie." The Civil War was not ancient history to the people in World War II. The old men playing checkers in the front of the general store when they were kids would have been Civil War veterans. This is the 50th anniversary. This photograph is 1913, the 50th anniversary of Gettysburg. It's also a time that many New Englanders saw Jim Crow's racism at its full hideousness. This yard-long souvenir photograph illustrates it plainly. The middle of the photograph is a collage of images from the maneuver. To the right is a Southern family with their mammy. On the left was a stereotypical black family. Now somebody had to cut out pictures and put all those images in there. the shack, the cotton, the watermelon. And this was sold as a souvenir. This inspires me. One of the next, my future lectures is going to be the African American experience in World War II, because it is a very interesting time. Here's a high-tech weapon of the time, a blimp. After a long wet slog back to Cape Cod, the Yankee Division arrives at Camp Edwards on Saturday, December 6th, 1941. It was Major General Truesdale singled out the 26th as the best unit in the exercise, better than regular Army divisions. After a long wet slog back to the Cape, the Yankee Division men rushed to the phones because they had a 3-day pass. Here they are crowding the telephone, making their plans. But of course, the next day was what? December 7th. Here's a photograph of soldiers listening to the radio in Boston and the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Uncertainty is rampant. Paul Metcalf of the 101st Infantry recalls pacing back and forth on the Bourne Bridge carrying a BAR on the night of December 7th. Units are sent to all Cape bridges to protect them from sabotage. The Yankee Division moved to Fort Rodham, Fort Table, where I'm going to do in the talk Sunday, in New Bedford, as to be headquarters for the defense of the southern coastal area. The 182nd Infantry Regiment was stripped from the Yankee Division and sent to the Pacific to eventually join the Americal Division. Now, what's interesting, by the end of the war, with the wounded and the replacements and men switching up to different units, there were more New Englanders in the Americal Division than there were in the Yankee Division, because that unit went over intact and as whole. The division was put under the Eastern Defense Command. The YD became part of the 1st Coastal Defense Command. The 1st Coastal ran from Maine to Florida. The 101st Infantry covered Maine to Rhode Island. The 181st covered Rhode Island to Washington, D.C. D.C. to Florida was covered by the 104th. The YD patches were replaced with artillery shell patch. The 1st Coastal Defense Command consisted of fixed defensive positions, mobile artillery, searchlights, and AA units. Soldiers were sent to guard the coast from attack and saboteurs. Is a photograph of a soldier guarding somewhere in the Cape. Don't know the town. They were housed in anything from mansions to barns. They could, if needed, break into vacant cottages. Here's some more troops guarding Cape Cod. The troops were rotated back to Camp Edwards for advanced training. U-boats were a significant threat. Here, Cape Cod's salvage flotsam from ships sunk off the coast in April 18th of 1942. There was a blackout put into effect around this time. Civilians were warned to stay away from the shore, especially at night. All homes had to have blackout curtains, and the top half of headlights were painted black. In the summer months, troops constantly encountered amorous couples in the dunes. They usually ignored them. On the coast of Maine, one couple could not be ignored. They had pulled their automobile to the edge of a rocky bluff overlooking the ocean. In his excitement, the driver failed to turn off the car's headlights. A beach patrol at the bottom of the cliff tried to get the driver to turn off the lights. The calls were unheeded, unheard. The soldiers took careful aim and shot out the headlights. The Nazis successfully entered 2 4-man teams of saboteurs, one in New Jersey and one in Florida. This act changed the Yankee Division's future. They were taken out of plans to go overseas, as Congress wanted the best troops protecting the country. It was decided to add dogs to beach patrols. 1 dog could replace 6 men. and was a huge asset in the dark. Dog training centers were set up by the Navy, one in Dennis and one in Martha's Vineyard. Many of the more adventurous members of the Yankee Division now decided to join other units that would be seeing action sooner. Many New Englanders with nautical experience joined the Engineer Amphibian Command, which was at Washburn Island in Falmouth. The 101st, the 104th Infantry were pulled from Coastal Patrol. A third of each regiment was used to form the 328th Infantry Regiment to get the division back up to triangular 3 Infantry Regiment configuration. Replacements were added to bring the regiments up to strength. The 181st and the Coastal Defense Command was kept in the Coastal Command as combat losses mounted. Members of the 181st were sent as replacements, especially to the 36th and 45th Divisions. The 101st was sent to Fort Jackson, North Carolina. The 104th was sent to Camp Blanding, Florida. Morale was low. The entire division was now ordered to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. In steps General Willard S. Paul, the short, round-faced, raspy-voiced officer, was charged with molding the division into a fighting force. The Worcester native graduated from Clark University in Worcester. He had joined the Colorado National Guard as a second lieutenant in 1916 and worked his way up to general. Reluctant to wait to meet his troops, he joined them as they convoyed to Kentucky. By August of 1943, the 26th was revitalized by General Paul and the officers he brought in. The Tennessee maneuvers from January to April 44 was the next adventure for the Yankee Division. Many YD veterans claimed the maneuvers were physically harder than combat, and this experience was a great help to them during the Battle of the Bulge. There was one tragedy during this vigorous training. In March of 44, elements of Company B of the 104th were crossing a rain-swollen Cumberland River when Lieutenant Dusky's combat boat capsized, spilling the heavily laden troops into the icy waters. Lieutenant Dunsky and 19 men drowned. On April 16th, the division heads for Fort Jackson to prepare to go overseas. The rumor mill was an extraordinary thing in World War II. Private Courtney decides to have some fun. At the sign shop, while waiting to have some wooden signs painted, he asked the letterer to make a paper banner welcoming Mickey Rooney to the 26th Yankee Division. Courtney had heard that Mickey was joining the Army. Various people come in and out of the paint shop. When Courtney gets back to his unit, he's met with wild stories about Mickey joining the Yankee Division. The troops found other ways to entertain themselves before they could join the war effort. While waiting to go over there, they read about the D-Day landings. They got sent a final 14-day pass, 4 for travel and 10 days at home. They boarded a train to Camp Shanks, New York, and then a ferry to Staten Island to board the U.S. Argentina. After an uneventful crossing in the largest convoy of the war, they arrived in Cherbourg. The Germans had wrecked the port's docks, so they had to go ashore by LCVP. They were driven to bivouac areas down roads that have Achtung mine signs on either side of the road. At this point, anyone with a GI driver's license was pulled to join the Red Ball Express. Red Ball Express was a one-way convoy system designed to keep General Patton's advancing Third Army supplied. There were red circles on the vehicles and along the roads, hence the name. 75% of the drivers were colored. When the drivers returned, they told others about seeing new combat boots that don't require the canvas lace-up leggings. An officer remembered seeing crates of the new boots on Omaha Beach. A group was sent to retrieve them. One GI crossed the mine tape to investigate a French farmhouse. He stepped on a bouncing Betty mine and lost his foot. 10 men went to rescue him. One of them stopped on a mine, killing 5 and wounding the rest. Combat engineers had to demine the area before the medics could attend to the wounded. This tragedy was turned into a learning experience for the Yankee Division. Troops and engineers were tasked with mine removal. They removed approximately 7,000 mines from the Normandy area. The skills acquired in this endeavor proved invaluable during the Battle of the Bulge. Patton's call for more troops meant the 26th was to join the Third Army. Patton liked to address the officers of a unit entering his command. Some units hated old blood and guts, like the 1st Infantry Division, and some loved him. The 26th loved him and would say, "I served with Patton," when asked about what they did during World War II. They were to relieve the 4th Armored Division, which had fought a tremendous tank battle against the Germans at Agincourt. Anybody else remember a famous battle at Agincourt? The longbowmen and the French cavalry, Henry V. That was Agincourt. October 7th, the first 3 combat casualties occurred. Brown, Conley, and Foley will be the first on the casualty list that by the end of the war would number 18,000. The relief of the 4th was finished on October 22nd. The relief was start of a strong bond between the tankers and the doughboys. After P-51 strafed and bombed the objective, the 104th started its attack on the Benzali-le-Petit on October 22nd. They made it halfway down the hill before hitting fierce resistance. Unknown to them, the Germans had received orders from Hitler personally to fight to the death, because this was actually an area that Hitler had personally fought in World War I when he was a corporal. Colonel Connolly stood out for his personal bravery. He added a cluster to the Distinguished Service Cross he had won with the Yankee Division in the Great War. There were probes, patrols, counter-battery fire, infiltrations by Germans the whole time the Yankee Division was in position. In November, the Yankee Division went on the offensive. Robert Coltswitz writes in his memoir, Before Their Time, on how his platoon moved aggressively forward, just like in maneuvers. Only they were wiped out by machine guns and mortar fire from the battle-hardened Germans. Malcolm played dead for several hours before the medics came at twilight to retrieve the dead and wounded. He had to listen to his friends slowly die. He was the only survivor and sent to the rear to work and supply. The division stayed on the offensive, battling machine guns, bunkers, artillery, mortars, and tanks. On November 8th, Alfred L. Wilson, a medic in the 328th, earns the Medal of Honor for treating other wounded soldiers until he succumbed to his own injuries. The weather was awful, cold, and rainy. General Mudd now entered the battlefield. Trench foot sufferers had to be evacuated, and sometimes the foot had to be amputated. Inspections of feet at all levels became mandatory. Change of socks became imperative. Dry socks were stored in one's helmet. It was at this time the 761st Tank Battalion, colored, moved up to support the Yankee Division. The 761st had been held back because of prejudice against black tankers. The unintended consequence of this was the unit had trained together much longer than most units. They also got to study the after-action reports of other armored units. The tankers came up November 10th, the night before the joint attack. The troopers of the 104th talked with and treated the tankers with respect. The tank attack met fierce resistance. A Black Panther Sherman was hit. The tank commander was blown out of the vehicle. A large Yankee Division sergeant asked the tank commander if he's hurt. He replies, "I'm hurt bad." The Yankee Division sergeant exposes himself to enemy fire and drags the injured man over a berm to safety. At the last second, a Kraut pops up and kills the big sergeant with a blast of his burp gun. The 761st Sergeant survived the war and always wanted to find out the name of the Yankee Division soldier that had saved his life. Another Black Panther received a head wound from an artillery shell that also injured some GIs he was talking to. When the tanker came to in the hospital, he was very sad because his letters, photographs were in his helmet. In the bed next to him was a grinning doughboy. His lower body was in a cast. The Yankee Division soldier passes the Panther his helmet, which contained all his letters and photographs. The next day, a general was visiting the hospital, asked them how they were doing and how they got wounded. When the general gets to the black soldier with obvious head wound, he asks him, "What are you in for here? Syphilis?" The soldier is hurt, stunned, speechless. But his Yankee Division friend didn't miss a beat and says, "Yes, sir. He got it from your wife." The general left in a huff. The GI shared a laugh. The 761st achieved one of the best war records of any armored battalion and earned a presidential unit citation. They figured out from the after-action reports that the Panther and the Tiger had a manual crank on their turret, which meant it could turn very slowly. Now, the Sherman tank had to be like 200 yards away before it could damage a Panther or a Tiger. So what they'd do is they'd send two Shermans moving very fast, attacking the German formation because they knew they couldn't slew their turret quick enough to track them, getting close and blow them apart. But a Panther round would go through the front of a Sherman, through the transmission, through the crewman, through the engine, out the other side. So if you messed up, you were dead. But that's how they scored the highest kill ratio of any armored unit, with this ballsy charge. The 26th was paired again with their old friends, the rested 4th Armored Division, for an assault on Sarah Union. The division trying to move together initially caused a huge traffic jam. Do you remember the movie Patton, where he comes out and directs traffic? I think this is actually where he did that. Another problem in continent was the reluctance of inexperienced forward artillery observers to call down fire. The Germans were able to move troops and tanks forward to counter the 4th and 26th Division's advance because the artillery observers were not sure who they were. The artillery was not started until the enemy was danger close because of the fear of friendly fire. After heavy losses and many replacements, the 26th Yankee Division opened a gap in the enemy lines to which the 4th Division could pour through and exploit. Somehow, a Thanksgiving dinner was supplied to the troops. The 4th Armored was able to capture bridges across the Saar River. The 101st Infantry Regiment was attached to the 4th to capture the high ground on the other side of the river. The Germans mounted heavy counterattack on Saar Union. Lieutenant Clark, on the second floor of a building, shot the commander of the lead tank coming in for assault. This caused all hell to break loose. Lieutenant Clark then ordered an artillery strike on his own position. He remained to report the accuracy and make adjustments. His own radio was destroyed, but he got another radio and continued to direct fire until the enemy retired. On December 2nd, Massachusetts native Colonel Creighton Abrams of the 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armored Division, came to Saar Union. He's the greatest armored commander of all time and namesake of the Abrams M1 main battle tank. And his high school football team was undefeated. The coordinating tank infantry attack drove the Germans out of the Saar Union. The tanks increased the infantry's firepower, and the infantry protected the tanks from the German infantry and the dreaded Panzerfaust, tank fist. The two units were able to advance quickly and put the Hun on the run. From November 8th to December 12th, the division had advanced 45 miles, liberated 132 French towns, inflicted 2,300 casualties, and captured another 2,700 POWs. Christians came early to the 26th as they were relieved by the 87th Division and trucked back to Metz. In this photo of 101st Infantry Regiment troops, only one, Arthur Stone, is from Massachusetts, Middleborough. That's how diluted the original corps had become. The Metz interlude was to reorganize the division and take in new replacements and equipment. There was only one duty to perform. The Fort Jean d'Arc was still garrisoned by Germans and needed to be contained. The fort surrendered to General Harkness as part of the Maginot Line. Harkness was famous for his abilities as a trainer and began to train the troops how to break the Ziegfeld Line. The work with C4, flamethrowers, and how to weld bunker doors closed were conducted. Messengers started to pour in about coming out the breakthrough in the Ardennes. On the 20th of December, the 26th joined the rush towards Luxembourg. The 26th was to be in the middle, with the 4th Armored on their left and the 89th Infantry on their right. The troops marched out on foot with reconnaissance troops and vehicles out front. The recon troops scored a major coup when they captured a surprised German colonel with his marked maps. Richard Courtney, the guy who played the prank on Mickey Rooney, set up a 57mm anti-tank gun with other elements to form a roadblock. A large group of Tiger tanks came down the road at them. All hell broke loose. The other 57mm gun and the Sherman tank were wiped out. They kept firing their gun. The ammo bearers would open up a crate and yell, "No ammo!" They had loaded bottles of cognac when they had captured a distillery in Sarre Union. The bottles fit nicely into the cardboard tubes. The shells were buried in some hay in a barn in France. After disabling their gun, they ran away and hid in a barn. They shared a Christmas Eve drink. Rich figured if they had not run out of ammo, they would have been and had to disable their gun, they would all been killed. Conditions during the Battle of the Bulge were brutal, extremely cold. Many of the veterans were sensitive to cold for the rest of their lives. Malcolm Fletcher, in his memoir, Not for Morbidity's Sakes, was relieved from his time on his 30 caliber machine gun. He could not unbend, had a rope put around his chest and dragged in that position back to the hospital. He was frozen in a crouch. That's how cold it was. He talked about making candy bars last for 3 days. When they got hot food, they ate like wolves. Then everyone had the GI trots. Every single account I've read of the fighting in the Bulge mentions having to sit in frozen crap and urine-soaked long johns. One of the most iconic photographs of the war of weary GIs is Lloyd Spencer and James Bryson on the 104th. Private John Ellsworth carries a load of blankets to help try and keep the other members of the 104th warm. In the accounts I read, the weapon that gets the most notice is the Nürbelwerfer. This rocket launching system was nicknamed the Screaming Mimi by the GIs. It's easily deployed, and the weapons packed a wallop. Men would be lifted out of their foxholes by the concussion, which could kill a soldier, not even leave a mark. Here is Sergeant Louis Dungle of Worcester holding a captured rocket. All of the hard fighting and suffering paid off when Abrams tanks were finally able to break through and relieve Bastogne. Close on the heels of the advancing tanks was the infantry. Behind them came the Graves registration teams. Now, the prank Private Courtney played at Fort Jackson had an ironic twist. While in Luxembourg, Mickey Rooney did come and entertain the troops of the Yankee Division. On January 26th, UID was relieved from frontline fighting. While in reserve, the unit attached to it was the 5th Ranger Battalion. The 5th Ranger Battalion was referred to as the Little YD, as many members of the division had left in 44 to form the battalion's cadre. There were many happy reunions with old buddies. For most of the month of February, the division stayed on the defensive, ready to repel any German counterattack. The breather allowed them to refit and replenish. The division went on the offensive with house-to-house fighting. In Saarlouten. In early March 26th, the Yankee division was relieved by the 65th Infantry Division. This unit had not seen the action, so relief was very slow and cautious. March 13th, the Yankee division attacked to breach the Siegfried line in the Seerig area. With excellent artillery support, tenacious infantry tactics, by the 17th of March, the 26th Division had breached the Siegfried line and its secondary defenses. This marked the end of the heavy fighting for the Yankee Division. The situation became fluid and speed was needed. The doughboys rode on everything imaginable and pressed German vehicles into U.S. service. The Yankees tried to keep up with the rapidly advancing armored divisions of the 4th, 6th, and 11th. Their job was to mop up, bypass resistance, and keep the corridor clear for following units. The YD freed many slaves of the Nazis. The Rhine River crossing was anticlimactic as the bridgehead was already secure. The YDers did spit as they crossed. They didn't have time to stop and piss in it, like General Patton did. Easter Sunday, April 1st, found the division entering Fulda, Germany. There was a fierce initial resistance that was quickly overcome. On these rapid advances, the troops would make themselves comfortable at the expense of German luxury items. Notice the German pistol. They would eat sea rations on fine china and then toss the plates out the window as there was no water to wash them. Private Fletcher woke up one morning in the town of Forschenburgerth with the townspeople all lined up in mourning clothes in the front of the house that he and his squad had commandeered. One of the town's families had treated a wounded German soldier during the night. The soldat had told them the Americans would kill them all because they helped him. They had lined up to be executed. He had to get a sergeant that spoke German to get them to disperse. The GI and the townsfolk were both crying. April 15th, they were in Czechoslovakian border. The 26th consolidated itself to await the oncoming Russians. They sent a unit south to eliminate pockets of resistance that were harassing service troops. There, the Yankees found a large cache of chemical weapons that were not used, thank God. The Germans had sarin gas and never used it. The wind wasn't blowing the right direction for them. It would have been a complete disaster, as most of the troops had long since lost their gas masks. One last feather in the Yankee Division's cap was that they accepted the surrender of the 11th Panzer Division. The 11th Panzer Division was their first adversary in France, and they surrendered to General Paul. Well, actually, they surrendered to Private Courtney. He and two of his buddies were walking 2 miles or so in front of their anti-tank company. They entered the town of Übing. Suddenly the ground shook, and they heard rumbling noises of an armored column led by a Tiger tank that was coming down the road. They had 2 carbines, 1 .45 pistol, 6 hand grenades, and Richard had a bazooka. "What do we do, Courtney?" his friends asked. "My bazooka would bounce off that tank like a ping pong ball, and they'd mow us all down. Let's just stand here and look tough." A green Mercedes pulled around the tank. It stopped. Out came a colonel and a general, and they wanted to surrender to them. He played it cool, told the general to order the division into the field next to the road and stack their weapons. The panzer troopers were ordered to pile their weapons and stand in formation. A U.S. Jeep comes around the corner, sees what's going on, bangs a Huey. An hour later, the brass come to accept the formal surrender. Courtney and his troops are ignored. His buddies are ignored. But they made all right, as they had dozens of liberated watches to share. May 7th came. All offensive activity ceased. May 8th, victory was declared of the war in Europe and end. The frontline troops of the 26th did not, for the most part, have wild parties. They didn't trust that it was over. But some did. It took a while to adjust the peace. Courtney and his friends went fishing with poles rather than hand grenades. They used to throw hand grenades in the water and boom, whatever came up they'd eat. The Army did the 11th Panzer Division a dirty deal. They were marched back past Courtney on the way to become Russian POWs. The Yankee Division was moved further to Czechoslovakia, where they were treated as heroes. There was some interaction between the Americans and the Russians. The Americans were disgusted with the Russian treatment of civilians. Soldiers with enough points were now allowed to go home. The 26th Yankee Division was sent to Austria. There was a strict non-fraternization policy, largely ignored. The Yankee Division was rushed to the isolated village of Dahlhira, Germany, for training. It was like returning to basic training. The Yankee Division was slated to fight the Japanese in the China, India, Burma theater. This was quite a blow to morale. One day while training, a Piper Club lands and outsteps General Patton, 6 guns and all. He decided that the Yankee Division had seen enough combat, and they were sent back to Austria. Discipline was lax. The troops were to help the populace get back to normal. There were Hungarian troops in Austria. The officers had brought their families with them to war. They did not love the Germans, but fought to keep the Russians away. As to keep Roosevelt's agreement at Yalta, they too were sent east to become Russian prisoners of war. Eventually, the YD was sent west, Army style, in boxcars. The slow train finally made it to Reims, France. The YD was housed at Reparation Camp Pittsburgh. While at Pittsburgh, the 104th Infantry was awarded the Croix de Guerre by the French government for the second time in its history. The train was sent to Le Havre or Marseille, where they boarded Liberty ships for the return home trip. And that is the lecture. Any questions? Comments?
I had a master sergeant was the instructor at one of the training programs I was at when I was in the Army, young lieutenant. He had been a private during the Battle of the Bulge. Now, I don't know if he was in the Yankee Division or not, but they hadn't had anything to eat for a while. You know, they'd been surrounded and so forth, and they didn't have much clothes to wear because it was so cold that he and a buddy stood out on the road and stopped a red ball convoy. And the first truck they came to, they said, "We're starving. What do you got back there?" He says, "The only thing we got are boots." He says, "We'll take them." So the assistant driver gets off, goes around, asks them what size boots they wear. And he got a box of about 20, 24 or something like that. And here you go, you got your choice. They're all same color, size.
Yeah. And
But he said the next truck that came by had food, and he said, "Let those guys go." And stopped the next one, and they threw off some food for him.
excellent. Yeah, no, the they finally got galoshes, the rubber overshoes to go over to keep it, because the French foot was still bad during the Battle of the Bulge. You know, the casualty rate for guys with trench foot was amazing.
He had it, and he said that he enjoyed. He was not from the South, but he was stationed there for the rest of his career, just about. He said, because I wasn't going anywhere.
Cold, yeah, no, they'd be sensitive to cold for the rest of their lives. You know, where they were damaged.
Give me some details on trench foot.
Well, if your foot's in water, you know, you take a long bath, your skin gets wrinkly and soft.
So don't bother coming.
So
Okay? I hope you got this message.
your foot's in water. You're in your foxhole, and there's water in the foxhole. Your foot's in water for days on end, and then it gets infected, and it can turn gangrene, and the cut off toes, and all that stuff. Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, you know. Obviously, when they got the galoshes and they were able to keep their feet dry, waterproof, made a huge difference. Because you know, you could change your socks in, but if you change your socks and you stand in ankle deep water, it doesn't matter. You know. Yeah, but it was brutal. Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you all. If you signed up for our newsletter, or if you got the newsletter that was sent to you, there's a sign up button on that. Let you know when we're doing other talks and stuff like that. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. All right, anything else? Except we will adjourn then and go to the 50-50 raffle and